Welcome to another episode of the Do Good podcast with myself, Rob Watson. And in this episode, I'm going solo on this one, guys. So it'll just be me chatting along for a while. So the title of this podcast is Carve Time Out for the Things You Love. And something that I just feel like it's so important that we're able to do. And I want to, in this podcast, share how I've been able to carve more time out for the things that I love. Like, for instance, doing this podcast, I really get a lot of joy and excitement from doing this, from meeting new people and sharing this and doing these things. Like, I get a real buzz from it now, and I've had to to carve that time out to do this, because on the whole, like, I'm putting out a podcast every 2 weeks and I'm generally interviewing someone, and I'm either going to them, and it could be down in London, or they could be coming over to see me. So I do, it takes probably up like a day a week of my time to sort of concentrate on this, so I can research them and all them things. But I'm so grateful that I'm able to give myself that time to spend on this podcast and to do other things as well that I've done, like last year, whether it be joining a running club and getting out with them twice a week, or starting to go like wild swimming and other things. And me and my wife, we go dancing once a week, and I've joined an art class. So these kind of things, which is basically what I love to do, and there's other things that I buzz off as well, whether it be, other forms of exercise or pleasure or whatever they may be and that's what I've been able to engineer for myself for the past 3 years, particularly because I think the best way for me to maybe get a message across of what I want to share is to talk about my own experience, things that have happened to me in my life. And I think that's in a way, it feels like it's maybe the only way for all of us in some ways to share, because I don't want to be I love either sharing other people's experiences, like what I've been doing with the people I'm interviewing, or sharing my experience, because I think there's value in it. And I think there's value in us all opening up more and being more open and honest, and talking about the things that have helped us, the things that have not helped us, just so we can, people can relate. I think people can relate to that a lot more. So yeah, I'm kind of like rambling a little bit here, but that's cool. So how have I been able to carve time out for things in my life? Well, I've been able to do that because around about 3 years ago, well, it is 3 years ago to this time, we made a significant change in the way that we worked. Before that point, I've got my own business and I've been running that now. This is now into our 13th year. But for 9 or 10 years of that, it was very much based on the traditional model of just grow and get bigger, which was, we started small and then we grew up to a team of 10, which isn't, it's not massive for a company by any stretch of the imagination. But I kind of think for a design company, a creative company, that can actually be quite big, really, for a creative company. Most around the world will be a small team, a very small team. So, and we would just follow that path of like, okay, well, let's get bigger and we'll go after bigger clients and we'll employ more staff and we'll get a bigger studio to work from. And there were so many benefits in that as well. But I never really, up until about my early 30s, I didn't really stop and think, is this making me happy? Is this the right path? Or am I just following a path that has already been set out for me? A template, really, like a design template that's already been there, go to school, go to uni, get a decent job, set up a company, buy a nice house, get a fancy car, all them things. And I kind of did all of that and followed that way of being until around my early 30s, that I kind of thinking, but I'm not happy. I've accumulated all these things, all this stuff, but I'm not happy in my life. My health was really deteriorating. I was so stressed and overwhelmed and anxious, and it was just like, and I'm thinking, why is this happening? Why I have followed what we're told is the idea of success. And I was looking around thinking, I don't even want this stuff. I don't want to live like this. I felt trapped by the confines of what was perceived to be successful. So I've gone on quite a journey myself for the past 6 or 7 years, even longer really, to unpicking and finding out what works for me and what is it that I want. Because I wonder whether most of us even know what we want, and if we're mostly being just driven along, swept along by the mainstream view of things. And I talked about this in my first podcast. Really what I'm aiming to do in here is empowering people to be their best selves and to realize that we've got so much potential in all of us, and we can do what we want in our lives, and we can do some good, and we can live a really fulfilled life. And that's what I am looking to do in my life, and I haven't got it cracked. I have not worked it all out yet, and I'm not gonna, I'm only 38 now. I've got many years ahead of me where I'm going to be still living and learning, because that's what life's about, living and learning. But I do believe it comes to a certain point when we want to do something that feels more fulfilling, more rich in our lives. For me, the big thing that's helped me was what we changed past 3 years ago. So like I said, we were growing the company, we were making it bigger. We were following that template of getting more staff, getting more working and all them things. And then it came to a realization around about a year and a half before we made the change that it had to change. It had to be in a different way. And we looked at plenty of different options, and it fundamentally came down to us wanting to have more time, more space, more freedom, more things in our lives, so we could stop putting things to one side or to putting them on pause. Because how often have we always said, oh, I'll do that when I've done this, or I'll look at this next year, or I'll do this next week, when I think it's just an excuse. And we have to, if we want to make the changes in our lives, we have to look at them now, and we have to reflect. So we were doing a lot of reflection in this year. And when I say we, it's because me and my wife work together, and that can bring up a lot of its own challenges, as you can imagine. And we've done it now for around about 10 years, so we're kind of used to it. But anyway, we made the choice that we no longer wanted to work with a fixed team. We didn't want to be in a fixed location, have permanent staff. We just didn't want them things. It felt like it was a chain to us. And also, each morning I was getting up and we were getting in the car and driving to work each day, which is a pretty standard practice for most people. Yet with the way things have changed over the past dozen or so years, the world is transforming, and so many things are going online, and you can work remotely pretty much anywhere you want, depending on what industry you're in. Now, when I got into graphic design when I was in my 20s, I had at that time no idea that I would be working on a laptop and could work anywhere. I just wanted to be a designer. I wanted to be creative. I wanted to express myself in some way. It's just happened that in a fortunate way, it's unfolded for me to be able to be in a position where, as long as I've got an internet connection, I can work anywhere. So these are the kind of questions that we were asking ourselves, and really coming upon to think, okay, how can we work differently? Now, it wasn't like we were working for someone else and we could just hand in our notice. We had to make the really challenging call to let all our staff go. And that, I've got to say, was one of the toughest things that I have ever done in my life. It was really tough, because we built up some really strong friendships. We were a small team. It was like a family in a way. So when you've been with the people for many years, to sit down to them and say, listen, this is how things are going to be, and there's not going to be a job for you in a few months' time because we need to go in this different direction, was really, really tough. And something that was extremely challenging to go through a process, and particularly me and my wife doing it together. Boy, did it bring us closer together, but it also caused a lot of challenges as well. Because everything, that's the thing, how it was happening for us, work was taking over completely. It felt like for me, it was sucking the life out of me. I'd achieved all the things that I'd set out to do when I was younger, and now I was kind of just doing it, keeping it going, to keep appearances going. So I have this impression that I was running this successful company and we had this fancy studio and all these things, but I was just sick of putting on an act. I wanted to just break free from that, and that was the way for us to break free, was to say, okay, we're not going to have any staff anymore, and we're going to move out of our studio. So 3 years ago, from the turn of when it's 2016, we made that huge shift, and it was pretty much overnight. And we came back home and we converted our loft instead. So and two big shifts. Now this is when I talk about carving out time. The biggest thing that happened straight away was I was saving 30 hours a month in travel time. I didn't have to get in the car each morning and drive to and from work. So just by making that change, and it was a big change, but that's 30 hours back. That's almost like a week's worth of work that I have back to myself, so I can choose to do what I want with that. That was huge for us, and we were working from our loft space, and previously we were spending a significant amount of cash on our rent for our studio, and that's dead money. It's not like it was a mortgage. It wasn't like we owned the building. That was each month we were spending out a lot of money going out there. And now, because we run it from our home in our loft, it's just, well, it's our home. You know, we already had that cost anyway built in. So them two things made a big difference. One, I'm saving 30 hours a month in time, but also we don't need as much cash. We don't need to generate enough cash because we don't have rent to pay. So again, this was us just being like clever in a way, and I think we can all start to do that. And whatever that might be, whether that just be like looking at your finances, and I think that's a big thing, to look at your finances. What you're spending each month, what's going out, what cutbacks can you make? Can you find them things cheaper? There's so many good ways of changing, whether that be to go into a better bank account, a cheaper mortgage, changing your energy bills, all them things that you can do. And, you know, I get really excited about them things, and when I can still get the same service or have the same product, yet it's not costing me the same each month. You know, I think we changed our home insurance and it dropped by about 70%. Now that's great. That's money back for you. Now, there's two ways of looking at this. You can either take that money and you can spend it or whatever, or you can either save it or you can choose to work less. And that's the thing that we've chosen to do fundamentally, is to work less. Now, I, on the whole, have enjoyed my job. You know, I get to work with some really good people and do some really good work for them. However, I don't feel fully fulfilled by sat on a computer all day just designing for someone else. I want to create more for myself. I want to be able to spend more time outdoors. I don't want to be cooped up inside. I want to be out in nature, in the garden, all them kind of things that I love. So for the past 3 years, it's been about carving time out for the things that we love, that we want to do in our lives. I believe we can all do this in some way. I think we just have to be honest with ourselves and think, okay, are we really enjoying what we're doing now? Is there a better way we can do it? Someone that's really inspired me, so I'm just going to tell you about a few people that have really helped me along the way. That is Tim Ferriss, and particularly with his book, The 4-Hour Workweek, which is full of loads of tips and tools and techniques of how you can become more productive with your time. Rather than us all being busy and running around like headless chickens and just swept up in it all, which instead it's kind of how you can be more smart. So rather than working hard, you start to work smart, and that's something that I particularly adopted from this book. A little bit of background on Tim himself. He was running his own company. I think it was some sort of supplements company. He was working 80 hours a week because he'd have suppliers and customers all over the world, and he was totally swept up in it. It was taking up his entire life, and he just wasn't enjoying it. I think he used a story in the book about how he went on a holiday in Paris with his family, and he was basically in internet cafes all the time because he had to be working, which kind of defeats the object of holiday, and kind of defeats the object, for me, having your own business and feeling, you want to be able to feel empowered, do the things that you want to be able to do, and he wasn't able to do that. So what he did is he started to research and look around and see what other people do and how other people were working smart instead. So he was able to reduce from working 80 hours a week down to just 4 hours a week by outsourcing a lot of things, and also using certain tools and techniques, like for instance with emails, rather than just being totally absorbed in them all day every day. He put an autoresponder on which said that he only checked emails at certain times of the day. Now that's something that I adopted, and it made a big difference. So what I was doing is, rather than coming into work in the morning, just drove in, spent an hour in the car or whatever, got into my desk and opened my laptop and just opened my emails. And then you can get totally sucked into that, and before you know it, an hour or two of your time has just been lost. So what I was doing is I would only check my emails at 12 o'clock, which gave me 2 or 3 hours to be focused on doing an important task. And another thing that he helped me with that I applied, which really saved me some time and got me some focus, was at the end of each day, what I'd do is I'd make a little list of the 3 things that I wanted to accomplish the day after, and I would focus on ticking off one of them things before I would open my emails up. Now, I didn't always stick to it, but on the whole I did, and it gave me a structure for how I could work, and I was finding that I was getting through work faster, rather than feeling like by the end of each day I was just had loads of tasks still to do. I'd achieved some of them important tasks straight from the off. So that felt really good to be able to do that. And whether you work in an office environment or not, but there's loads of things that we can just be conscious of about what are we spending our time in, are we focused on. And I think a big thing for all of us, myself included, is the time that we spend on our smartphones. Now, we can do great things with our phones for sure, but I think a lot of us get sucked in and spend far too much time, just lost time really. We just feel sucked in social media, reading articles or whatever, and we can feel irritable after it. Well, I would do anyway, because I'd be like, I could be doing stuff with this time, because each moment, each day, is precious for us, and I want to do what I can. I want to get the most I can out of this life and make it the best one I possibly can. So taking a step back and looking at things and going, well, what could I be doing? Is there a better use of my time? And this book, The 4-Hour Workweek, had a significant impact on the changes we were able to make. It definitely planted some seeds, the 18 months or so before we made the big shift about how can we work smarter, not harder. And that's something that has really stayed with me since. Someone else that was inspiring me around that time as well was a guy called Mr Money Mustache. A few people might have heard him. He's become really popular over the past few years. I first heard about him about 4 or 5 years ago. Basically, from the ages of 20 to 30, what he did is he worked his absolute arse off and saved about 60% of his wage each year during them 10 years. So when he got to 30, he was able to retire. Now, just think about that. Retire at 30. Isn't that just it's incredible? Very few people can even conceive of that. Most people think, well, I've got to work till I'm 65 and then I can have a pension pot. But often, by the time you've got to 65, you've given all your best years away and you're tired. And it's kind of like living for the future, thinking, oh, okay, I'll be able to do this. But who knows what your health's going to be like then? And all the things that you're going to give away in that, your time. Your time and energy, which is so precious and valuable. And then over. So this guy retires at 30, and that's him and his family, him and his wife. They built up enough cash to then invest that. Now, he does live a very frugal life. I think he's over in America. I think he's in Colorado. For him and his family at the time was about $25,000 a year to cover all their expenses. So they made, he wasn't making millions a year to retire. He was making about $100,000 a year, I think, something like that. And they were able to save about $50,000 or $60,000 each year. Now that's a lot of cash, but after 10 years with interest, you're looking up close to $1 million. And he's able to work out how much does he need based on how many years they think they're likely to live for and what interest they'll receive off that. So he isn't just sat up with his feet up. He is out there working, doing plenty of other things, but he's doing it for the joy of it. He's not doing it because he needs to do it. And I think that's the big thing, is most of us do a lot of jobs that we don't love. I've talked about it in a few podcasts. I think it's something like 70% of people do not like the jobs. And of that 70%, I think there's about a third of people that really despise the jobs. And I feel a lot of us end up doing these jobs and these things because we do it out of from fear, not for the love of it. Fear that we have to pay our bills, we have to do this. And of course, there's an element of all that. However, but I think it comes to a point where we just end up just going along with it and do that for years and years and years because that's what we think that's all the options are for us. But I believe there's another way for us to go, and we can carve that out for ourselves and design our own lives. I think there is definitely a movement now, and there's so many people that we can look up to and be inspired by. It's endless now with the internet. Do you know what? It's an amazing time to be alive. look at, for instance, this. I'm doing this podcast and I'm able to share this stuff with you from my own home and just upload it onto the internet. Go back, 20 years, 15, 20 years. The only way you're doing anything like that is if you get a job in broadcasting and you can do this and you can do that. Now, we've all got it all at our fingertips. And that's why I think it's an amazing time to be alive, and we can all find our voice and find our place in all of this. Life can feel very chaotic and like total chaos at times, can't it? Switch on the news. It doesn't seem like it's a great place. That's why I've touched on in my first episode about us switching off from the news and switching onto some of the good stuff, because then we're going to feel inspired. And that's what I aim to do with this podcast, is to inspire you through the people that I'm speaking to, and potentially through what I'm talking about as well, by sharing my experience of my life and the things that I've done that have helped me. I believe because they've helped me that they could also help other people. We're all our own case study, and I think we can all speak our own version of that and just be honest and authentic and be our true selves. That feels like right to me. So anyway, Mr Money Mustache, what a guy, what a legend. Now, as always, I will put show notes onto these, and I'll add links to the people that I'm talking about and the things that I'm sharing, so you can go delve into these people. Because that's what I loved about stuff in the past. I've either listened to a podcast or I've listened to something, and then that sent me off on a tangent, and I've been like super inspired, be like, just delve in that. I'll either read the book or listen to the podcast or watch the YouTube channels, just get a huge download really of their information and see how it can help me in my life. So Mr Money Mustache basically carved out 50 years of time for himself. That's what he was able to do. Now, isn't that amazing? Now, my life now isn't really about building up a huge amount of cash. That isn't my aim right now. My aim right now is to carve time out for the things that I love. And I've been able to do that more and more. And I intend to do it. Keep going on it. Keep refining it, because that's what it's about. I don't think we should just settle where we are. Unless you're truly, truly happy and truly fulfilled with what you're doing and truly content, then I know in my life there's still adjustments that I am looking to make, little tweaks here and there, and that's what it's about. It's about tweaks. Sometimes you can make a big change, like what we did 3 years ago. We basically went from one way of working with staff and expensive studio to having no staff and no expensive studio, which freed up a significant amount of time. What I would say, there was a lot of adjustment in that. It wasn't like, oh great, we've just made the change, life's all hunky-dory. It was a very emotional process to go through, so there was a lot of processing that we had to do. We had to really adjust to this new way of working, and it was. I knew straight away, even though there was times and I was like, oh, this is tough, For one, telling all the people that we had to let them go, and moving out the studio, that was huge, because we then had to work with them for 2 months, knowing that after that point that we weren't going to be with them anymore. And we had this studio which was full of stuff. We'd had 9-10 years worth of items in that space, and I'm like, I am not bringing all that home. There is no way that all that is coming with me. And that's another thing that I want to talk about. I want to talk about decluttering, because I think it's an amazing tool to use to literally, you create more space, you create more head space, you create more physical space. Everything feels better. Clear your space, clear your mind. I totally believe that. So rather than just bring all that stuff away, I aggressively was like, right, none of this is coming home with us unless it's absolutely essential. Like, for instance, say, our laptops and some stationery and a few bits and bobs. But I'm telling you, 95% of the stuff got either sold or given away to charity. And for about that's what my aim was, for like 4 or 6 weeks, because if I would have just brought all that home, I'd just be like totally overwhelmed with everything that we've got. And around that time, I was given a book, Marie Kondo, which is The Magic Art of Tidying. Hugely, hugely influential for me. I'd say there's probably been about 4 or 5 books that have truly, truly transformed my life. I'll talk about them in other podcasts. But this was one, the Marie Kondo book, because in the past I'd gone on like a decluttering sort of spree for a few years beforehand in my house and the things, my clothes and my books and everything. But the game changer of this one is because how I'd do it before it, I'd end up looking around my room or wherever it was, and I'd be looking at the things that I didn't want. I wanted to get rid of them. Where she flips that, and in fact, you focus on the things that you want to keep, the things that bring you joy. So I applied that model to a lot of stuff, and amazingly, I let go of even more stuff, and I was left. You're basically left with all the things that bring you joy. What better way than to surround yourself in your life with the things that bring you joy, rather than be looking around and thinking, oh, I need to get rid of that, I need to get rid of this. In fact, you're looking around going, that brings me joy. Isn't that a great way to be? A great way to live. And just a great mindset. It's a bit of a flipping of a switch from like a negative viewpoint of things to a more positive outlook. So we applied decluttering big time to make the shift, and still do it now. I think all of us can relate to at times of having too much stuff. And this then ties into some other people that have really inspired me, called the Minimalists, which is Ryan and Joshua, who are over in America. And it's interesting, there's a real theme for me. Most of the people that have inspired me over the past half a dozen years have mainly come from over America way. On the whole, I really feel like they've been leading the way for us, so we can now follow suit in many ways, whether it be health and well-being, in terms of careers and all them things. I believe it's really been coming up, and it's coming over like a wave. So what I feel I'm doing now, I've interpreted that into my life and made the necessary changes, and I'm seeing the results, and I just want to be able to share that now and feel like that can add some value to some people that may be listening to this. So the Minimalists, Ryan and Joshua, they were in corporate America making, a decent salary, $100,000 maybe a year, but they were spending it all. They had massive apartments. The money was going out faster than it was coming in. And I think a lot of us can relate to that in our lives. It's just like things just snowball and get bigger and bigger, and we just get swept up in the way things are. Sometimes we just have to rip up the rule book and be like, no, it's time for a change. We can't live like this anymore. It's madness. And that's what was going on in my life. I was looking around thinking, I've got all this stuff. I've accumulated all these things. Yeah, I'm not happy. I'm not actually being creative anymore. I'm not having fun or joy or getting pleasure out of the things that I'm doing. I'm doing them because I feel like I just have to, or because of some other conditioning. So these people like the Minimalists, Marie Kondo, Mr Money Mustache, these people were really having an impact on me. And they went through a massive decluttering process of letting go of the things that no longer bring you value. And that's the thing, keeping stuff that brings meaning to your life or adds value. That feels like, okay, how many of us have that stuff around, or how many do we just get cluttered up with stuff? I heard a statistic that the average home has around 300,000 items. Like, just think about that for a second. 300,000 items. What are we doing? All this stuff, which isn't obviously making us happy, because if it was, we wouldn't need to keep on buying more stuff to give us more pleasure. And all it is we're getting an instant hit of buying something, but it doesn't last. Because if it lasted, we wouldn't keep on buying more stuff just for the sake of it. Now, I think a lot of us are doing it. Definitely, it's 100% emotional, and we're looking to fill some sort of hole or some sort of gap, or to give us that little bit of pleasure. And come on, who doesn't want some pleasure in our lives? But how about, instead of buying new stuff, we create new stuff? And that's something that I've been doing in my life the past 12 months, particularly. Like, I've started drawing and painting again. And that's something that I haven't done really for years. Even though I'm like a designer, but I've very much been on a computer for about the past 15 years. When I was younger, I used to love to just draw and paint. Someone might listen to this, might say, well, it's okay for you because you can draw or you can paint, but actually we all can. We can all be creative in whatever ways. So now I've started to like draw and paint more, and just have a sketchbook near me. And whether like I'm watching a film or something, I might just sketch away, or I've got a journal and I might just do something, a little doodle or something before I go to bed. And it's remembering and reminding me of when I was a kid. And actually when I see kids now and see how in the moment they are and how playful they are. Now, of course, it feels like we have to grow up and we have to be serious and get ourselves jobs and look at a career and a home and all them things. And of course, you know, we can't all live the lives like we did as a child because there's greater responsibility as we grow up. However, I feel like there's just a so much better way to do stuff than we've been doing it. And I believe I'm seeing the results in my life now through working in a different way, working less. I'm earning less as well. I'll be straight, you know, I'm not earning the money that I was earning a few years ago. Yeah, I still have everything that I need and everything that I want in my life. Because one, I'm not spending as much. I've got more of a greater value for what money is. In the past, like I would just like constantly be buying stuff. So now I really, really care about and think about what money I've got. Like we used to go out, you know, we'd go out like eat maybe 7-8 times a month. And that might seem quite normal. But now we'll go out maybe a couple of times a month. Talking about carving out time for things you love, one thing I've absolutely loved doing the past year particularly is being in the kitchen and making food. I get such a buzz out of creating something new and making it myself with my own hands. I came across someone that was talking about this, and cooking is one of the few things that are our main 5 senses that we're aware of. They're the ones that they're all activated during that time through cooking. How many other things are there that you can say that engage all them senses in that way other than cooking? I love to be in the kitchen, and what I do is now I'll either listen to a podcast and I'll be like making something new. And it's just it feels like a really nice space to be in, a nice place to be in. And I would rather be doing that and making new food and experimenting with recipes than actually going out a lot of the time and just eating crap food in a lot of places, particularly where we are. It's getting better. There's no doubt it's getting better. But there's very little organic options when you go out. Also, you pay when you start to like think about what your food really costs you at home, you start to realize what you're paying for food that generally isn't that great. Now, I'll still go out, still love to go out at times, but it's just being more conscious of it. And then when you do go out, it's more of a treat. Because if you do something all the time, it's not a treat, is it? It doesn't feel like a treat anymore if you do too much. So I know what, I don't even know if this has been bloody useful, this podcast and the things that I'm sharing, but I would like to believe that through me sharing the things that I've done to help carve the time out for my life and what I'm doing now. Okay, I'll give you some more information about me. I now work a lot less. Typically work around about 20 hours a week in my business. That's what we do. And it's not all plain sailing. It's not like, oh, just sit down and do these 20 hours and the money just rolls in. We have still ups and downs. It still runs a business. Sometimes we have better months than others, and we had some slow months last year. We did. But what that enabled us to do was to spend the time, even more time, on the things that we enjoyed. Like I was able to start my podcast last year because we had a bit of less work coming in. But generally, around about 20 hours a week enables us to still live a really good life. That feels really good to be able to, because it's not, you know, it's like Mr Money Mustache. He doesn't just want to stop working or stop doing stuff. It's like he wants to use his time in a more fulfilling way, a more meaningful way. So we will work with our clients' work for 20 hours a week on average. And then we've got other time, what I consider like our passion project days, whether it be which is basically our Mondays and our Fridays. Sometimes it gets mixed up. Sometimes we're on it with this, but other times it sort of bleeds through and stuff onto other days. So I'm able to spend a day on this podcast. And who knows how this podcast will unfold for me. At the moment, I'm not thinking, oh, it has to be generating income for me by an X amount of date. I don't know what will happen with it. At the moment, I'm just kind of learning my craft for it and having fun along the way and meeting really interesting people, which are really inspiring me. And I'm getting some really great feedback from people as well. And that feels really good, you know. Do believe what I'm doing by sharing it, then other people can get a lot out of it as well. And I think that's what comes down. You've got to do the things, do it for yourself first. If you've got something to say it because you want to say it, or do it because you want to do it. Don't do something just because you think there's other people will like it or you'll get some sort of recognition for it. Do it because you want to do it first. That feels good for me, and the way I'm going on it, and I'm not really I don't want to cut many corners on it. I'm not gonna say I'll just get them on because maybe they've got a big following or whatever. I'll do it if it feels right. If I believe, are they doing some good in the world? Are they inspiring people in some way? Do I think people will get some value out of these things? So yeah, I'm able to spend a day a week on my podcast. That feels amazing. And this is the thing, you don't have to suddenly say, right, okay, well, I need to drop down a few days in the week. There's this lovely term that people talk about, get your side hustle on, which is so you can able to, if you're in a job that you don't particularly like doing, but you've got a passion for something else, whatever that might be, it might be you like to write poetry, you might like do some crafty things and make cards, or whatever that might be, whatever it is. A lot of people that I'm hearing, inspiring people, they'd still be doing the day job that they don't particularly enjoy, but when they come home, they'll spend a couple of hours on it. Or at the weekends, they'll put in half a day into it at the weekends, or a full day at the weekends. I've been doing that as well over time with stuff, and I will happily come up in my loft and spend some time at the weekend on this podcast because I get a real buzz out of it. And that's the thing, it's not really about fitting it into a certain framework of working like a 9 to 5 or anything like that. When you feel creative, or when you feel like that desire in you, or excitement to do something, it doesn't matter what time of the day it is. And I think that's one of the challenges that we all face is thinking we have to do something and fit it into a particular time. It doesn't feel quite right for me. I want to be more flexible and more fluid with how I want to do stuff. Because let's be honest, sometimes you might sit down or get into work, whatever, and you're not in any fit place to be working. Productivity levels, you're going to be on the floor for that day or whatever. You'd be much better if you were more flexible. And again, I see the world shifting in that way. Well, it already has, and it already is, and it has been for quite some time. So, and like I say, this is a bit of a new approach for me now, and I may do some more of these. I think I probably will do some more of these where I'm just going to have a little chat for a while and share some of the things that are doing good in my life. And I believe by carving out time for the things that we love in our lives, that it will certainly do us more good. It'll make us feel more happy. It'll make us feel more fulfilled. We'll be better around other people in our lives because we're doing the things that we enjoy. And here's something that sticks with me a little bit. So we've all heard the term of FOMO, haven't we? Fear of missing out. And I think it's really important. This is another tool for me to carve more time out for myself, is to say no more. And I think it's really important that we build that confidence in us to just say no. Because you end up getting your calendar and your diary, your diary ends up just getting full to the absolute brim of all these different things that you want to do. And where is the time to do the things that you really want to do? Now, if you're enjoying filling your calendar with loads of social stuff, that's great. For me, it got to the point where I was getting frustrated because I knew there was things that I wanted to be doing in my life, things that inspired me, that I was creative with, that I wasn't doing just by, say, going out for food all the time or hanging out with friends and doing this stuff. And no, don't get me wrong, them things are really crucial to do. But how many times, have we done stuff and we've got there and actually we're certainly not missing out on anything because it's either it's a crap night out or it's this, and you could have happily stayed at home, or you could have done something else, the thing that you wanted to do. And I believe by saying no more to things we don't want to do, that frees us up to say yes to the things we do want to do. So here's the term, instead of FOMO, how about JOMO? So the joy of missing out. I heard that a while ago, and that just a little light bulb went off for me, and I really liked hearing that. The joy of missing out. Do you know sometimes when you maybe hear something's been cancelled or whatever, or you're not going to go to something, it's like you've got that space back, that time back to do the things that you want to do. We've all got the same amount of time per day, and each day, when you wake up, you've got a fresh day ahead of you. Why don't we start using that time more wisely? So do the things that we really want to do in our lives. For me, like I said, this podcast is something that I really want to do. I've got other ideas for other things that I want to keep going with this. I want to develop some more products. I'm working on a kiddies project at the moment, product, which really excites me, which is really giving me meaning. In a way, that's my do-good project, which I'll share about at some point. So this feels like a good time to wrap up this podcast. I've enjoyed this one, just sort of rambling on for half an hour or so. I hope you've enjoyed it as well and have taken something out of it of how you can potentially carve some time out for your life so you can do the things that you love. So anyway, until next time, have a good one.